We're going to call the meeting to order here. The combined Bikeways committees of Chatham, Harwich,
Hey, David.
Orleans, and Brewster.
John.
I'm going to flip this around. We're just about to get going, so.
Great.
So
Hey, Brad.
we want to
Good. Is it warm? Yeah.
Okay,
We
we started
wanna,
the meeting.
Cool here.
report that this meeting will take place of the usual Bikeways Committee monthly meeting for Harwich. Although we do not have a quorum, we have Paul Gazai and myself in attendance. We have Alice from Orleans. Alice, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi. And Alice brought along a guest, Gail Levin.
Hi.
And then we have Susan from Brewster.
Hello there.
And there's nobody else from Brewster, right?
Nobody. Right.
And we have John from Chatham.
Hello.
And we have an additional Chatham representative here
And
with
Steve,
us.
yep, I'm here.
And we have two individuals on FaceTime joining us remotely from Chatham.
Brad and David.
Brad Bivens and David Whiting.
And I'd like to introduce Andrew from Mass Bike.
Hi.
So I guess, one other important guest here is Lev Malkoff from, he's the Cape Cod Commission Senior Transportation Planner. And Lev is going to talk to us today about Vision 88, connecting Cape Cod by bicycle.
Could I just make a note
Yes.
for the record that none of the towns have reached a quorum of their members? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Strictly an informational meeting. So I guess we can begin, Lev.
Let me introduce Lev, and then we'll turn the control of the meeting over to Lev. So Lev has been working in the area of bicycle planning, bicycle engineering, and probably generally transportation planning for something close to 30 years. Lev graduated from Virginia Tech. He has a BS, an MS, and a PhD in civil engineering. So very well credentialed. He's been employed at the Cape Cod Commission since 1988. Current position, as Fran noted, is a senior transportation engineer. In that role, he's participated in numerous bicycle and bicycle-related planning studies throughout the Cape, including a number of town-based bicycle plans, including Chatham about a year and a half ago, as well as a variety of other towns. He's done some Cape-wide plans as well, kind of dealing with connecting bicycling activities with transit resources. He's assisted in securing state and federal funding for some of the larger cycling projects on the Cape, such as the Cape Cod Rail Trail. He oversees data collection, including bicycle and pedestrian counts, which we're aware of. And he's also, not only does he talk the talk and walk the walk, he's an avid cyclist, so he rides the ride as well. So with that, let me turn this over to Lev to walk us through a couple of topics related to working groups that we have going, and as well as whatever he may be able to share with us in terms of complete streets. So Lev,
Okay.
it's all yours.
All right, so the title of the presentation, I've just adapted one of these presentations I did for a statewide conference about Cape Cod's bicycling efforts, which we're calling it Vision 88, which I'll explain in just a minute. But I've fine-tuned it a little bit so we can talk a little bit more about the things you all are interested in, looking at funding and data collection and other opportunities. So you got some of the different types of facilities shown in this slide. You know, on-street access, crosswalks, people sharing the road in downtown Chatham. And, you know, very familiar with, of course, the Cape Cod Rail Trail in the earlier slide. One thing everybody should be happy about is part of connecting Cape Cod is the new crossing at the Bass River. The bridge is open for business. They haven't had a ribbon cutting yet because they were just still checking off a few little details, but I think it was a couple months ago when they determined it was safe and fine to leave the gates open. So at some point, there will be a dedication of this bridge. So looking at kind of the big picture, part of our regional transportation planning effort is to establish a vision for bicycling on Cape Cod. This is the shared use path vision map, so it's showing existing shared use paths such as the Old Colony Trail down into Harwich and Chatham, and Cape Cod Rail Trail, Shining Sea over in Falmouth. But also,
Excuse me, Lev, can we just pause for a second? Let me just do a sound check with my two fake folks who are remote. David and Brad, can you hear Lev
Yes.
speaking?
Yep, John, can you point the camera a little bit more towards the screen so we can see the map? There we go, great. That's perfect, good.
Great.
Sounds good.
all right. What you see there in the green are the existing paths. The red are those that have been programmed in one of our transportation funding documents. And the blue lines are looking at, you know, the obvious gaps in that network in providing some of that longer distance travel. And folks in this area would be interested to see if we can start to look at a connection from downtown Chatham to Orleans to you know, provide an opportunity for people to have a comfortable bicycling experience. So then we have the, I guess it's not all these are in the printouts, but the Vision 88 concept is looking at providing a continuous connection on a safe and comfortable facility all the way from Woods Hole at the end of the Shining Sea Bikeway up to the canal area, and then from there all the way out to Provincetown, using the existing Cape Cod Rail Trail and the new segments that are coming online. For example, in fiscal year 2022, we have programmed $6.5 million for the service road path in the town of Sandwich from exit 2 to, I believe it goes to exit 4, and then we'll eventually go to exit 5, and also on to exit 6 eventually. Then we have the extension of the Cape Cod Rail Trail in the towns of Barnstable and Yarmouth that would connect the existing path that goes to Bayberry Hills Golf Course. There would be a new facility constructed that would cross Willow Street on a new bridge over the railroad tracks, and then through Barnstable down to Mary Dunn Road, which would be the end of that phase. And the idea, of course, is to connect all these pieces up eventually. Also nearby, we've had a planning effort in the Outer Cape, specifically Wellfleet, Truro, Provincetown, looking at opportunities to extend the Cape Cod Rail Trail and other facilities connecting to the rail trail throughout those 3 towns. So this is a study that's available on our website if you'd like to dig into that a little bit more. The most likely alignment from this effort is to have a facility on the side of Route 6 in much of the Outer Cape, just due to the fact that the existing rail alignment has been sold off to private interests. People have constructed structures on the alignment under private ownership, and there's a number of other environmental concerns. The original rail line went through a lot of wetlands and marshes. The bridges are all gone. There'd have to be you know, significant effort in permitting if that were ever to be considered. Um, So I'm going to talk a little bit also about the connections, to this Vision 88 concept. We have in the Outer Cape a number of efforts that are actually have been or are being implemented. Up here, they're kind of numbered, going from starting in Provincetown, out at Herring Cove. The concept is to take 2 of the travel lanes out of service and repurpose them as a shared use path from Shankpainter Road out to Herring Cove. You might have seen something in the news today. There was an article in the Cape Cod Times talking about the Shankpainter Road Route 6 intersection and showing some of that facility. The second item down there is looking to extend some bike lanes in North Truro. Item 3 is a completed project. They've added bike lanes or created bike lanes along Route 6 in that section of Wellfleet and Truro. Number 4 is looking at the Main Street intersection in Wellfleet. I think there might have also been something in the Times today about the proposed extension of the Cape Cod Rail Trail from LeCount Hollow Road to Route 6 in near Main Street in Wellfleet, and then the concern is having people then continue on to Main Street back and forth to the extended rail trail. So there's still things to be worked out as far as what that design might look like due to the narrow constraints. There's wetlands on one side, there's a lot of businesses on the other side of Route 6, there's a cemetery, so it's going to be very challenging to provide that service. But I think it's very important because people want to go to destinations. They want to go to villages and go where they can, spend money in a restaurant and enjoy what the towns have to offer. And they're going to be traveling along that section of roadway. They already do, and the question is, how can we make that as safe and comfortable as possible? And then we at the Commission have recently are completing an extension of the bike lanes from that item number 2 up to Shankpainter Road in Provincetown. So we have some ideas and options that we put forth in a draft report for providing bike lanes along that section of Route 6. So another related topic that I'm sure some of you we've already discussed earlier tonight is looking at the opportunities to access Complete Streets funding. There's a Complete Streets funding program that Mass DOT provides up to $400,000 per town for construction of projects. So what is a complete street? It's a facility that provides safe and accessible options for all travel modes, walking, biking, transit, and vehicles for people of all ages and abilities. So we have been working with the community town of Eastham to create one of these plans, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in the next couple of slides. The steps, basically, each town that wishes to access this funding needs to create a letter of intent, create a policy, and develop a prioritization plan that then, once that's approved, they can apply for funding for projects. Important to note, especially in some of the Outer Cape communities, Route 6 itself would not be eligible since it's under control of the state. This is I guess it's a good thing because this money can be used on your town roads, but only on your town roads. The state highways would be addressed under a different process. As I mentioned, we are wrapping up a project with Eastham. These are the locations that were included in the prioritization plan. So for the most part, it's the important roads in town, the lower volume roads, the subdivision roads, are in some ways already considered bikeable or walkable because they're lower speed and they have lower traffic volumes. Oops. There's also another effort that we created a plan, 2017, looking at Route 28 itself, with the idea of identifying key segments of Route 28 that are unavoidable. So if you were to take a hypothetical journey from along Route 28, including, say, Knobska Light and Woods Hole, all the way to Chatham Light, how could you make that travel without having to travel along Route 28 any more than you had to? So looking at side streets, lower volume streets, some of the scenic options along the way. Due to the geography of Cape Cod, we have inlets and landforms that don't have that connectivity everywhere. So there'll be segments in different towns that it's really unavoidable for cyclists to avoid Route 28. So these are the key segments that were identified in part of this critical location study. There's a little piece in Chatham based on this potential off 28 route. So much of this is on street because we don't have bicycle facility bike paths to look at, other than, say, the Shiny Sea in Woods Hole going up to downtown Falmouth. So in Chatham, we have a segment, if folks wanted to take a journey from South Harwich, they could come up Pleasant Street and then travel along Route 28 and then go up Morton Road, where they then could access the Old Colony Rail Trail and continue on to downtown Chatham. So that's a short segment of Route 28 that would be unavoidable. It's a little bit of a lower concern because there is sort of a sidewalk on one side, so there's space that you could maneuver without having to put yourself in the traffic stream. The segment in South Harwich over where Gorham Road connects then to Julian Road to get into West Chatham, that piece of road really would need some type of facility. So at the very least, having some type of side path along Route 28 with safe crossings of the minor street, and then one crossing of Route 28 is an example. So I encourage you to take a look at that plan as well. I know that there's discussion about where are the safer roads. This might be one of those types of things you could look at for at least that section of Cape Cod. Now, one thing that we've done in the Complete Streets effort in Eastham is to do what we call a gap analysis of where are the greatest difficulties for cyclists and pedestrians to travel along the town's roadways. So first thing we did is we used our data, mapping data, to find the roads that are not low volume, low speed. So and don't have sidewalks already. So they don't already have something on them. So that's a lot of streets. In Eastham, it's many of their roads. I think on the town roads of Eastham, they only have one piece of sidewalk, and that's the Bridge Road Bridge. On the bridge, that's the only sidewalk on a town road. I think there's probably one more that I'm forgetting about. But for the most part, you don't see sidewalks on town roads in Eastham. Route 6 has sort of a sidewalk that's in pretty poor condition. But so we're looking at then all those other roads and then identifying ones that would have the greatest utility for a cyclist or a pedestrian. So where are the most destinations clustered? So if you have, we had two categories of destinations. One was called community activities, so it included schools, libraries, town hall, all these municipal entities, trailheads for town conservation lands. So the things people would want to go to as a community activity. Then we also looked at business activities. So these were the commercial establishments. So those that were within a quarter mile, or those within a half mile, or those within a mile, we assigned them a scoring, a number of points, and then used that scoring to create this color-coded map. So the brighter colors are would be showing down at the bottom, well, it's hard to tell what shade that is, but the more reddish color, those are the places with the most places to go to, the most places you want to walk or bike to. So overlaying that on the network of roads that don't have sidewalks or aren't low speed and low traffic volumes, those then are the places where if you were to provide an improvement, a sidewalk or a bike path, it would have the best and highest use. So that's something that we're hoping to carry forward in future efforts. I do want to say that the Massachusetts DOT has issued a draft of a statewide bike plan that looks at a lot of these same issues, and I encourage folks, if they have some interest in that, to go on and look at the statewide bicycle plan at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation website. They're open now for comments. It's a draft, and they're looking for feedback from folks, so I encourage everyone to take a look at that. There's some mapping in there that you can see some of these same issues.
Just one thing on the draft plan. So at Mass Bike, we're putting together kind of a consolidated summary to help guide people through it, because it's very extensive. So if anybody needs any help or anything like that, as you go through the plan, let me know. Our documents aren't by any means a replacement for it, but it might kind of help to some of it, because it is extremely extensive.
Can you isolate the Cape area from the plan pretty easily?
On the
or-
maps, you can.
Yeah.
Yep, certainly on the maps. Honestly, I haven't finished. I haven't finished going through the entire document, so I don't know if certain.
It's an online experience. You know, it's user-friendly, but when you get to the maps, you can then enlarge and zoom in and then see the different. Some of it shows you where your existing facilities are. Some of it shows some of these bikeability, you know, relationships that I've kind of been addressing here.
But it's important that we utilize this comment period, because this will guide us for the next, is it, I think, 10 years?
Until they update it, and
Yeah.
we don't know when they'll update again.
That's what we've been told, is that it'll be for the next 10 years. So it's important that we take advantage of this time. We only got 2 weeks left.
When does the comment window close?
31st of January.
31st. Okay.
So another resource for folks here is to take a look at our data products that we've been collecting all kinds of transportation data for a number of years, and then publishing them one way is on our website. So with regard to bicycling, specifically, we do conduct a small number of all-day, we call all-day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Counts at locations. We've been doing them in different regions throughout the Cape each summer. And as I said, there's only a small number, 2 or 3 locations each year. Then that's because it's very labor intensive. People need breaks, and you can't have somebody sit there 12 hours on their own. So we usually do that in July when we're not doing our other types of activities. But we also do collect observations of bicyclists as well as pedestrians whenever we're doing an intersection turning movement count. So when we're out there, for whatever reason, a town might request some information about an intersection, we'd be out there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, counting the vehicles, but we're also observing where are the cyclists coming from and going to, as well as how many pedestrians are crossing on each of the different legs of the intersection. So that's also provided, we filtered that information out and included that in one of our appendices of our traffic counting handbook. Our document has those 12-hour counts as well. It has these, we probably do about 40 or 50 of those every summer.
Okay. So I know that we have had other counts, and I don't know if that's included or if you're even aware of other head counts, manual ones that have been done on the Cape here.
Sometimes, and we do solicit people to help us out, because like I said, we can't get to a lot of places. We do have on our website a little guide. There's like a sheet there that explains what we collect.
Yep.
And then we will include that in our database and publish that back out too, so people would have access to that. So we don't mind being a clearinghouse for folks if they can provide it to us, whatever, fax it
Yeah,
electronically.
rather than double counting sometimes, in the
Oh,
same
yeah.
area.
If we were sitting at an
the
account,
things-
somebody was counting next to us, we'd take turns.
So all the user account material you just referred to, that's available on the Cape Cod Commission website?
Yeah, so at the bottom of this slide is the direct URL.
Okay.
To save you from having to click around. So commission.org/counts. That has all of our traffic counting product, including the bicycle pedestrian counts. And like I said, when we're out there for 12 hours, because it's relatively easy, we'll classify as much as we can. So we'll get the kids that are in the trailer separately, and we'll get the joggers separately, and if there's a wheelchair.
Because we're attending and
Yeah.
doing basically the same thing
Yeah.
in Orleans and Harwich and Eastham. Where else can I think about? Something like that through the
One
summer.
other thing that we encourage folks, and that we do when we're out there, is observe how many are wearing helmets.
Yep.
Of
Helmets
the
with and without.
cyclists and the skaters. If you're jogging, it's not that important, hopefully. But for the folks that should be wearing helmets, we also will make a note of that as well. So we can kind of track how that's been changing over time.
I have a question, Lev. So the data, is it raw data, or is it, there's some analysis done in terms of location? Is it like the same location every year so that you could
No.
measure what the change
We
might
do
be?
repeat some locations, but others we also will go because there's an interest in getting
Okay.
data from a different area. So there are some data that, like I think the trailhead in Dennis on the rail trail, we have counted several times, so you could see a
Okay,
trend
same
from that.
location.
So what's the
Yeah.
goal of that
Yeah.
data collection? What's your goal for that?
Well, it can be used in a number of ways. One, it kind of can show what is the possible usage of a facility. So when we're proposing a new facility, we have something to lean on to say, yes, these are the types of numbers that we see on a facility like we're proposing,
Right,
for example.
yep. So, for example, if your count is mostly focused on the rail trail use, or not
For
necessarily?
those, because we're getting, like I said, when we're doing roadways and intersections, we're getting some of the similar data. This is an opportunity during a week when we're not doing our other types of data collection to go where we wouldn't go otherwise. But it's also something we've gotten a lot of inquiries and people have asked us about, and that's one of the reasons why we continue to do it.
Great, no, I think it's awesome. I'm just trying to think about your purpose and goal and how it might interface with us. If the primary purpose is, for example, to support and develop the 88 vision, that's great. In terms of what we're thinking about, secondary roads to connect our communities, it may not be, what we're trying to do is for a different purpose, right? Am I wrong about that, or no? Because it seems as though the user count, if it's primarily looking at, who would we expect and how much use might we get on this major corridor, that's great and necessary, but it may not correlate to supporting the goal that we're thinking about.
So let me make an observation. The user count group has kind of wrestled with this a little bit. And you have kind of two paths. One is if you have, as you're suggesting, if you have a goal, you can sort of collect data that supports that goal. That's great. It takes a while to figure that out and then to go collect the data and so forth. And I think what the Cape Cod Commission has been doing is kind of looking at certain key points and just collecting data. And I found on this, I've done an application for a motion detection warning light on the Old Colony Rail Trail, and I had to make a presentation kind of describing or specifying the need, these guys had some data that I used that wasn't prepared particularly for this purpose.
Yeah.
But we had user counts from a one-day count in last July on the Cape Cod, on the Old Colony Rail Trail by Route 137, which just, I didn't know, I knew they had it, but I didn't realize what we were going to do with it. It was very helpful in defining the need. There was also a vehicle count on Route 137 that I just discovered a couple of weeks ago that they had done last summer as well. And I was able to take that data and sort of use it in a way to support the point I was trying to make, which is there's a real need for a traffic control mechanism at that
Yeah,
point.
good.
So it can kind of work both ways, is my point.
Well, the reason I was asking is that I know there's been some question about, are some of the things we're thinking about duplicating work that's already been done, which clearly we don't want to do. But it sounds as though there's different, there's some merit in trying to get a handle on a profile of who's visiting our towns for biking purposes, not just for passing through on the rail
Yeah.
trails, right?
No, that's certainly another purpose, sure.
Yeah.
Do you measure direction? I mean, you're doing both directions in one
Yeah,
location?
if we're out there for the 12-hour,
Yeah,
we're trying to get everything we can,
Okay.
just to keep it interesting, you know?
yeah,
So we'll classify the eastbound traffic, count the helmets, joggers and pogo sticks and everything else, and then we'll do the westbound separately. And
Okay.
so it's all saved.
so that could go to your streets, which direction are people going in?
Yeah,
And how
yeah.
many are going in that direction?
Yeah,
Is there-
and it's broken down by time too, so it's not
Yeah.
just a total.
Do
We're
you-
there with the electronic board, so we can break it down to 15-minute blocks if you needed to get that
Interesting.
fine detail. But at least you can see, it's busy in the morning, it's busy in the midday, you'll know, when the
So
peaks are
could you
too.
clarify for me how you determine where to go and do those counts? Is it upon request or,
It
Can
has been
we-
on request when we
Okay.
get a request. If not, then we will select just a discussion
Okay.
among the staff. As I mentioned, some is we'll go repeat a count so we can see a trend, or we'll look at where we've done our counts and see where there's gaps.
so if this group asked you to do three locations, or one
I
location?
don't know if we could get all three, but
Okay.
it's definitely worth asking. I would say there's a good chance we'll do at least one, and two might even be doable. And then ask for three, and then, or I should say prioritize
Okay.
them. Give us
Okay.
in order the ones
Priority.
that are most important to you. And then depending on, if sometimes we do have a third technician. We did last summer part of the time. And so if we have 3 technicians, we have some summer college students here for the
Yeah.
summer. And those are the ones we send out, and we'll do those things for us, so.
So as I recall, I saw David Nolan actually sitting in a beach chair with the device.
Oh, yeah, it's great work.
Yeah. And so there's some kind of a device where somebody is kind of capturing the data, pretty simple and straightforward, I suspect.
It's just a board, an electronic board with buttons on it.
If,
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
'Cause we've been doing it manually.
I mean, it sounds like the labor is kind of the constraining resource for the most part. I mean, if we were to somehow had an interest in collecting data on a certain area in our individual towns, and we could provide the labor, however we did that, would it be possible to borrow those boards?
I can look into seeing if we had one spare, because we had lent one to Dr. Gross, who is what is he? Cape Cod chapter of Mass Bike?
Not
Yes, he
anymore.
was.
He used to be.
He used to
Used
be.
the previous iteration.
Yeah, but he's a bicycle liaison with one of our committees.
Yeah.
So let me inquire,
Okay.
because I'm not
That
going
would
to
be
say
great.
no if we can help. Then it'd really be a question of then bringing the board to us to process it.
Right.
Because it's electronic and,
Yep,
At least this way, the data would be consistent to everyone, you'd be collecting all the same
Yep.
type of data, and you could extrapolate it any way that for your personal needs, if need be, which makes a lot of sense.
If I can, I'm almost near to the end, unless there's a question
Okay.
at this point?
Question at the end.
Okay. So opportunities, additional resources. Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation and the Mass DOT have a program called Mass Trails. There's a website link there at the bottom of your handout. They can provide grants. They range perhaps $10,000 to $100,000, even up to $300,000 for high priority projects. So I would encourage folks to look into that program as they're thinking about, what types of projects you might be interested in. But that's something that definitely is worthwhile if you're looking to, construct something.
So is that for construction costs, design costs, or preliminary studies, or?
Well, it's for construction. I am not 100% sure if design is included or not. We'd have to
Okay.
look into it a little bit more.
And who does Mass Trails belong to? Is it Mass DOT or Mass DCR, or?
DCR and DOT together
Okay.
have provided that service. Okay, so that was what I have for my kind of overview.
Question, I don't know if it'd be a combination of the $400,000 per town or the Mass Trails could that include, like, safety warning lights along the trails?
I would think so, yeah. Yeah.
Because we've been doing here, and I know some of the others had interest in doing it in some towns, we've been trying to get it approved, like one light a year, because it's a $25,000, investment in the town. But if we could have other resources for some monies, maybe we could, and I'll say Harwich could finalize I think we got 5 more streets that we need to cover with some safety warning lights.
And this would be on the Old Colony Rail Trail, or?
No, a little both. Some would be the Old Colony, some would be the Cape Cod Rail Trail. I mean, we've got 4 approved now, last 4 years. We've got another one, hopefully will be approved this year, for next year. And I think we've got 4 more intersections that were prioritized that we'll be proposing, but, it's like proposing one a year. If there's some monies available somewhere else, maybe some of the other towns can also utilize this monies for their lights.
Well, the complete streets, from my understanding, if you were to include warning lights as part of your prioritization plan, it likely would be considered, but to just be focused only on those lights as a part of a complete streets
Probably would not.
application, it likely wouldn't. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lev, because they're looking at more comprehensive development that's accessible for, to really look at your whole town infrastructure and making that. So I would be surprised if they would look at, say, our plan is to have, 8 new lights. End of
Gotcha.
story, right? But if it were integrated as part, am I correct about that, or do you?
Well, I'm trying to picture how this would all get put together. We're talking about the Complete Streets program?
Well, you mentioned the $400,000
Yeah.
grant through Complete
Yeah,
Streets.
either
For
one.
example, I mean, that's basically essentially it's a spreadsheet of your priorities. And if it's gonna be, maybe a corridor where, and you're talking about actually the rail trail crossing a local street. I mean, that could be in your priorities as one of the priorities, and whether it's the top one or not, it could be listed there as a line item. But, the priority plan usually looks at, a length of road, and what can you do to make it safer. But in a way, the rail trail it's a bicycle pedestrian road right now, so that wouldn't be, I don't think that would be a problem if you wanted to include it in that. You also can combine opportunities too. A lot of the projects in Eastham are since the roads are relatively long where the projects are identified, they go over that $400,000 price limit. So then the question is, well, how do you do it then? And the answer is, if you were to do it, you would have to also have other funding streams. So
I have a question about
maybe not the mass trails, but maybe something else.
the
Yeah.
400,000. Is that for annual? Is that, how does that work, that 400,000?
That's the way the program's set up with a limit you can apply for in a year.
In any given year,
Now, when I say you can apply for it, I'm not saying you're gonna get it.
right.
But you have to do the plan in order to apply for the funding. So, you know, you do your
So-
best job and it's competitive because other towns are also involved.
So is 400,000 shared amongst other towns?
No, it would be for your town.
For your town.
If you were successful.
Okay.
I don't offhand know how many millions they have each year going out to the towns. But for now, right now, it's still a little bit in its infancy because on Cape Cod, we only have Sandwich as a completed plan and Eastham's completed plan, which is yet to be finally approved, but it's been submitted. So there's not a lot of towns in this part of the state that are up and running with the complete
So
streets program.
So when you put your plan in place, you can pick and choose which streets you want to focus on. Is that right?
Ideally, you have a priority, so you're picking the one that's most important. But there
Okay.
may be a reason, permitting or some environmental constraint, that you will go down the list and pick a lower priority, but there should be a justification for that.
Do we have to look at the whole town, or can we just look at 5 streets?
Well,
If that's
it's
what
meant
you
to be
wanna do.
comprehensive. I think in Sandwich, they did an interesting thing. They excluded their scenic roads because they knew those were gonna be very problematic if you're gonna start now doing any widening or add shoulders so they looked at the other streets and developed a plan for those.
So is this program looking for you to do a comprehensive view of your whole town? And list that in your plan? In other words, we can't say 5 streets we want to focus on, that's it.
Well, those could be your 5 priorities.
I see, but you have to look at all of them?
Well, you
mean, that's
you
a
have to have
big
some kind
difference.
of rationale or basis of what you're doing to select them. For instance, in Eastham,
Yeah.
we didn't select the neighborhood streets because we had a reason
Okay,
to exclude them. So
yeah.
there's got to be some reason why you're picking the 5 streets, and that would be very helpful in explaining how these are your top priorities.
Are there some instructions online for how to do this
There's a whole
application?
portal, you can learn all about the
Yeah,
program
oh.
at the masscompletestreets.com.
Okay. Because I think there's some misconceptions in my town around it, how it works.
There's a great guide at MassDOT.
I know most of our people have been trained in the town. They've gone to the trainings.
Yeah, so that's step 1, is that
Yeah.
you have to have, identified folks
Oh, yeah,
go to that first training.
we have.
And then, Lev, I was gonna ask you, because we've submitted our letter of intent. I don't know how fast MassDOT responds and turns these things around, but if we are to get the $50,000 planning grant and wanted to partner with Cape Cod Commission to do the planning, how does that work? Do we hire the Cape Cod Commission, and, is that through your office or through someone else?
Well, the people in my office would be able to help you figure that out.
Yeah.
Because, of course, it has to fit into our staffing level and work plan and all that.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if they're $50,000 anymore. The Eastham grant was less.
Was it?
Yeah.
It's up, well, again, it's up to $50,000.
So,
So, yeah, that's great.
but I'd say we at least should have the discussion so we can see how we can help.
Yeah, great.
Gail had a question.
It was kind of the same thing, that the process is that you do the letter of intent, then you might get your up to $50,000, then you do your plan, then you submit your plan, so you're not getting your $400,000 until
Oh, sure, I'm sure
you've
it's a
gone through A,
process.
B, C, D, and E, right?
But it's
And then
just
you
one
might
more
not-
way to help
Yeah.
your town.
Right.
It may not help you right away, but while you're doing all the other things, doing the best with all your other resources, then it becomes another resource.
Is there a time limit on usage of 400, or what, 100,000, or whatever it is that you get, if you get it?
Within the fiscal year that
You have
it's
to use it
granted,
within the year?
that it's granted.
You do.
Well, yeah, once you apply for the funding for the implementation, you'd have a project, a real, defined, all its characteristics and design, because they have to know what they're buying with the money, what they're paying.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, Lev, if you wouldn't mind, I wanted to ask you a question about the Route 28 critical location study, because that, if, that, I would like to learn a little bit more about that, because it looks as though that's kind of in the bailiwick of what we were thinking with the group that's interested in doing some mapping within the 4 towns of, off the trail and off the main thoroughfare route mapping. So how far along is that project, and is it mapped out already, those routes?
Right, if you look in the study, you can see the routes that were suggested as the alternatives to Route 28.
Great, just within Chatham and Harwich?
All the way from Falmouth to Chatham of Route 28.
Okay, and do you have any sense of how far out they go to the north, for example? Is it looking to connect to the rail trail, or it's just kind of, is that?
It's really looking at Route 28 and what the choices are in order to ride your bike near Route 28 without being on Route 28.
Got it, okay.
But on comfortable roads as much as possible.
Great. Great.
Right.
And
But those other issues of connecting throughout the towns, I think some of this mapping that the state's done will help you a lot too.
Okay.
Looking at the places where people, more likely would be biking, and then also looking at some of those characteristics of the roads.
Do you see some merit in doing that, or is it redundant?
Well, I think the gap analysis is maybe one of the most useful things that can come out of this is, looking at where the biggest demand would be, because otherwise you wouldn't know when to stop.
Right.
It helps you narrow in on where the places are most likely to be used by people, and then also looking at then where the roads aren't suitable or are suitable.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions. Just picking up on the Route 28 study, gap analysis, I guess. So the Cape Cod Commission, prepares something. Sounds like it's more than a conceptual study. It's got some detail to it, since I think you indicated you looked at the streets that might be more amenable to cycling versus not. So there's a document that is generated. Is that fair?
Yes, there's a report. And I should have mentioned, I did right there, on the slide, the last website address there, commission.org/bikeped.
Yep.
There's a whole library there of these types of studies. There's a whole suite of other things too that might be of interest that relate to these towns, like the connecting, there's a connecting downtowns study in there. There's also connecting to transit in the different towns. So I would look at those as well. The connecting to the downtown study looked at a single recommended route from Cape Cod Rail Trail, for example, to the downtown location in each of the towns. So that might really help you at least get started with some of these.
So it sounds like that's a way of kickstarting a project. There's some work done by the Cape Cod Commission. That's essentially available to the individual towns to then take it to the next step, whatever that might be, construction or realignment or reconfiguration, or what is that kind of the way it works?
Yeah, I would say so. Take a look at that. There's a lot of different mapping tools that are online you can mess around with. The Route 28B originally came out of a Google map, which is basically shifting the routes.
Yeah,
In order to connect, this town line to this town line, what are the options in getting folks, off 28, for example.
with respect to the Route 28 study, I guess you said from Falmouth down to Chatham, have any of the communities along that route sort of picked up any of the Cape Cod Commission plans for that as yet, or is
They
there anything in
haven't
the
been
mill?
moved along as much as maybe we would hope, but I think the one that might be on the closest to the front burner would be in Mashpee.
Yeah,
There's a section from Mashpee Rotary to a road called Quiniquisette, where it's very heavily traveled, but it's really, there's no other way to travel east-west from, western parts of Mashpee or Falmouth into Cotuit and other parts of Barnstable. So, but there's a great opportunity there. There's some I guess it's conservation land, but there's an old road that goes through the woods there that's just sort of grown over, but
Yeah.
the pavement's still there.
yeah,
So it wouldn't be total disturbance,
Yeah.
like a new road cut or a new bike path.
Is specific to that area, because I had somebody approach me this fall about that exact section. Is that just conceptual right now, or is there anything being moved along? I reached out to the town of Mashpee and never got a reply.
I think the Mashpee Commons project, expansion project, is kind of controlling this,
Okay.
how far and how far along it moves, because I think they control some of that land.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on that then.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Might want to also hook up with Catherine Loren at DPW She's
In
aware of it.
Mashpee?
in Mashpee.
Okay. Yeah, I tried, but I'll give it another shot.
Lev, are those studies, for example, the connecting downtowns, is that searchable on the Cape Cod Commission website if we just
You can
said, or is there an
use the
easier?
search tool. It's probably easier just to go to that address.
Okay,
And then they're all listed there,
great,
in a big, long list
thank
there.
you.
Um,
It's really helpful.
I have another question on Complete Streets. Have the awards on an annual basis been posted somewhere in terms of what each town has gotten or received? And sort of what their proposals look like?
Yeah,
or
I haven't studied it enough to know how the other towns are doing.
To just, isn't it public knowledge? I mean, everybody should see
it
what
should be.
other towns
It's
have received?
posted on
It
the
is?
Mass Stop. Yeah, you can see what.
Like last year, what some towns received and how much?
And it's really great because they have model plans and model
Oh, so it is out there, okay,
Oh, yeah, letters of intent that went from the various
yeah.
towns, a lot of them up in the sort of suburban and western Boston area have been really big on this. And as Lev said, there's only like 2 places on the Cape that have even begun. Sandwich and Eastham, right?
Yeah, so it's
So what is-
map-based. You can zoom in on different regions of the
okay,
state,
to
click on
see.
the town, and then you can download the products that were related. Like, you could see the prioritization plan of Sandwich if you wanted, or the policy for,
And how much they received?
I think so.
Yeah, there's like a chart, if I'm not mistaken, that shows the towns and what they've received and where they are in the process. There's almost like too much information, it's huge.
What is the $50,000 for again? Somebody mentioned that. Is that after the
There-
letter of
there's
intent?
There's funding that the state will provide to help you develop the plan,
I see.
because
Okay.
the plan takes time and effort, and some towns will secure a consultant, or in the case of Eastham, commission work with the town to develop the plan.
And that's aside from the $400,000 available?
Right, it's
Okay.
one of the steps. You have your letter of
Threshold
intent,
steps.
you need to develop a policy, you need to develop a plan, and the plan is an effort, so that's where that up
Mm-hmm.
to 50,000 number. And then, once the plan's approved, you can apply for the 400,000.
So I had a couple of additional questions on the user count topic. So I'm wondering if you or anybody on your team has looked at other mechanisms by which counts might be done. I mean, I think you and I talked briefly about putting an infrared beam up or something that might detect. Have you done any work on that, or is there any?
It's something that we're interested in pursuing. We did have a program to help towns with infrastructure that it's now finished, and we hope to reinvigorate it. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the bike rack program. Many of the communities throughout the Cape took
Yeah, I'm
advantage of
familiar
that.
with it.
And we were able to expand that to include other types of equipment. So there's about 7 of these fix-it stations that are being installed at different locations where you can pump up your tires
Yep.
or adjust your derailleur with the tools right
Yep,
there.
yep.
We wanted to pursue adding bicycle detection equipment, if we could, to that funding stream. Or if not, we'll try to see if there's some other way to do that. I know with, in the past, we did acquire this radar unit, but it was very inaccurate. I think some of the detectors along the rail trail at the flashing lights, I think Brewster 124, I think up in Eastham, they have bicycle detection to activate the warning lights.
Yeah,
I think those are recording those events, but I don't think they're recording number of users. So they're recording number of triggers.
yeah,
So
yeah,
if you're riding with a group of 2 or 3 people, that's an event.
yeah.
Or a single person. So I think that's still useful information because it kind of shows activity as
Over a
it
long
varies
period
over
of
the
time.
year.
Yeah.
Different months you're going to get more triggers, and other months you get less triggers, and you could possibly make an assumption that each thing equals so many riders. But the technology is always changing,
Yeah.
and improving. So it might be time to revisit what's out there.
So the other question I had on sort of the user count topic, so one of the things that we were interested in trying to do is sort of develop a profile of what the average typical example rider might be in a certain area. Have you familiar with any approaches or any studies that might have been done that might give us a little inspiration on that kind of a thing? Short of,
I guess it would be a survey of some kind.
Yeah.
And maybe if you look like, we have done outreach events on different locations on the bike path where we will have like giveaways and water bottles or
Right.
something. And where a person doesn't feel that obstructed to stop and chat
Right.
with you. And then you can start to get some of that information. That might be the best way I could think of.
Yep.
Is, stop here for a 2-question survey and get some kind of swag.
yeah, okay.
That was kind of, I'm at fault for suggesting that, because I thought that for the Bikeways committees, as they go to, back to their town councils and with ideas, it's good to have personas, so that the towns understand who's recreating, who's using it to get to work, who's using it with their families, all these different causes, because what I've experienced is that there are certain groups that just don't understand who the pedestrians and cyclists are at all. So it's very helpful to kind of conceptualize that.
I actually agree with that. A meeting I was at, it was an assumption by a member of another committee was that, only kids bicycle.
Yep.
And it's clearly wrong in Chatham
And there are
Orleans.
some people that think it's only people doing the PMC,
Yeah, right.
or.
Racers.
Right, there's any number of misconceptions, so I think that persona is helpful, and it doesn't have to be an end-all, be-all, but.
Maybe there could be, if there was at points where the cyclists have to stop, maybe at a road junction, and I'm trying to think of a safe way to do this, you could make something like you've seen in some airports. How did you like our service? You tap a button, depending on what.
Yeah.
And maybe the button could be, I'm a commuter, I'm a recreator, or you have to have the message in a way that's understandable, but it could be a simple survey like that, and whether, it's tapping something like a button, and then you keep track that way. But
No, Brewster's done surveys. We do them on Conservation Day every year. We take a booth, and then we give away granola bars. And you just come in, they do this 5-10 question survey, and you get about 50, 60 people who like to answer them. But that's, you know, not just cyclists. You've got all kinds of people coming to Conservation Day. So maybe at a town event, you could take a booth and set up bike committee
Yep.
booth. Hand out some free helmets.
Yep.
Or raffle off a bike or something. But Stop and Shop donated about $100 worth of granola bars last year to us. So that was pretty nice.
I'll say. David or Brad, did you guys have any questions or comments?
It's really good information, all of it. I'm interested. I was just looking online to try to get more information about the gap analysis, and I really wasn't able to find it. And unfortunately, I'm not able to see the websites there. How would I go about looking at that? It seems like a great template to start for us, you know, for figuring out best routes and towns.
Well, the latest version of that would be in the Eastham Complete Streets study.
Okay.
And the easiest way to access that would be capecodcommission.org/Eastham Complete Streets.
Great. Thank you.
John, would there be a way that you could send a few of these websites to us here so we could really access, because this was a well-presented discussion here, and I really learned a lot here.
Yeah, no, I can do that, Brad.
I've left
There's-
extra copies of the presentation here if you want, anyone wants to take them back to their other committee members, so they'll have access to the information.
These two fellows are in Florida. But
Okay.
nonetheless, we can get the resource to them.
Okay.
Lev, the gap analysis, so you mentioned the best way to see the gap analysis is the Eastham example. Is there any descriptor on the process that was used, or can you give us any tips on how that was done?
Yeah, there's a description, a write-up of the assumptions used in order,
Okay.
you know, as I mentioned, you're looking at the different distances from the different activities, and then counting how many there are within these different ranges
Yeah,
as you're moving along a roadway, and then the ones with a lot get the higher score.
and were there some assumptions built into prioritizing those activities? Was it like economic assumptions, or?
Well, there were two categories. One was businesses,
Yeah.
business activities. The other one was,
Schools and
what do we call it, community activities. So, you know, schools, libraries, those types of things,
Yeah.
trailheads, town halls. So that's just the very simple first cut at it. You know, there probably are ways to make it even more elaborate.
Yep.
One thing that we're looking to modify and improve that technique is to overlay population density, so that you have the other end of the trip, where do people live, to then go to those destinations. Because I think that'll really help a lot too,
Yeah.
make that interconnectivity.
Any other questions?
could I take the opportunity just to say a few things and distribute something and ask a couple of questions?
Why don't we maybe wrap up with Lev, and then in the public
Okay.
comment section.
I
we
only
can
have one
mention-
last thing to, commercial for you. We're beginning to kick off a process we do every 4 years. It's a regional transportation plan for Cape Cod. We're doing an update of it. We last did it in 2016. So this is going to be an opportunity for folks such as yourselves to give your vision of what Cape Cod's transportation should be like over the next 20, 25 years. And we're going to be launching a survey in early February. I'm sorry I didn't put it on a slide, capecodcommission.org/RTP, Regional Transportation Plan. So the webpage has our existing regional transportation plan. We'll also be announcing a series of meetings where we'll go out and listen to what people have to say, as well as this online survey. So I wanted just to let you know that that is an opportunity for you. The regional transportation plan is intended to cover all modes of surface transportation, biking, walking. There'll be information on trains, ferries. There'll be airports in there. But also looking at the changes over time going forward, what our needs are going to be, and what your concerns are for safety problems you see in various intersections and roadways, congestion problems, and then things that are missing, like missing links in the bicycling network. So I encourage everybody to keep their eyes peeled. We're going to be doing some announcements in the next couple weeks, and that's going to be a process that runs through the spring up until about April or so.
Lev, would it make any sense for us, this is a real raw thought, but would it make any sense for us to actually look at that survey in some collaborative way for response? Or are you guys looking for just, you know, anybody on the street, individual responding to what they might think is, what's the audience for the survey? It's open to any individual?
It's going to be
who
open to
wants
anybody, but it's also going to provide some self-identifier information if you wish to, as well as a little bit of the, I don't know, I guess you call it demographics, where it asks, you know, where do you live? Not the address of your house, but what zip code do you live in? Where do you work? And where do you play?
Yeah.
Okay, and then look at, you know, how people travel. Also, it's going to have a number of questions about some of these bigger projects, and whether there'll be support for, you know, additional highway lanes or additional bike paths or any number of topics, so we can try to gauge interest. So that's why I'm talking to you, because you guys will have the right answers. I hope.
Thanks.
We'll keep an eye out for that for sure.
So you said CCC / or /RTP?
Cape Cod Commission
For the
slash,
plan?
I think.
See where it says bike ped?
Yeah.
Just change the word bike ped to RTP.
Okay, got
I
it.
mean, you can go to the main page of the commission and navigate through. I'm just trying to save you a little bit.
Yep.
of clicking.
That's gonna be really important for us to look at, all of us, right?
Absolutely. Lev, hey, thank you very much. This is very helpful. Really appreciate the fact that you took the time to come at 5 o'clock at night.
My pleasure.
And we know where to find you in case we have other questions.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming down.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If we're going to run, can I just give you this?
Sure.
And then I'll talk to you about it later.
Okay.
But it's more or less what I said on in my email earlier. Can I just,
Sure.
I'm coming at it from the totally micro part, whereas you're looking macro. But what I'm involved with is a program that we started 3 summers ago, which is now called the Cape Cod J1 Road Safety Program. We started it being bikes, and then and we started a pilot study, which some of you know, in the Lower Cape. And through Mass Rides and through Mass Bike, Mass Rides organized trainings that Mass Bike did at Ocean Edge, Wequassett Inn, Chatham Bars Inn, and the Orleans Stop and Shop, and expanded last summer in the second year to a few other places. We've been able to incorporate all of the police. I actually got myself invited to the Cape Cod Regional Law Enforcement Council Chiefs meeting, which was quite an event with everybody with their guns and their uniforms. But they were great, and basically, thanks to Mass Bike, we were able to purchase, with the help of the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority, Cape Cod 5, and Mass Bike, some terrific lights that we distributed. So basically, over the last 2 years, we've distributed close to, well, 1,700 lights, I guess. There are 4,000 J1 worker international students here every summer, and that program has not dried up yet. It probably will, but it hasn't yet, and so they will be coming again this summer. I was at a conference in North Carolina in November that is for community support groups who work with these kids, who I will always call kids, as I was saying earlier, since I'm 77. And I was very interested in what the Highway Safety Research Center of North Carolina through the University of North Carolina is doing. The Outer Cape, the Outer Banks is kind of like us, except that they literally have only one road that goes up and down, and their state road is the beach in some places, which is really strange. But there are a lot of similarities, and what I just want to bring to you all is that they have this Watch for Me North Carolina program, and I'm just going to send, I don't have enough for everybody, but if you just send them around for one each town. And let me just very quickly say that some woman gave a talk with 45 slides that looked like this, which, you know, one of the other speakers told us that the average attention span of a millennial, or the students that are coming over now, or our kids, is 8 seconds. And we did a 7-minute video last year. 8 seconds. Yeah, you got it. You're the right vintage. And that's what they were telling us. And we did this lovely video, you know, as did every other organization all over the country for J1 kids, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be J1s. It could be students in school. It could be anybody. But we had all this talk, and we really tried to make it simple because these are second language speakers. So in that sense, it's similar, but we still did 7 minutes. And they're talking about do everything for like stuff like this, and what I passed out to you, where you have posters and you have bumper stickers. I'm looking at yours instead of mine, and I think I sent it around. But when you look at what you've got, there are some you know, a couple of bumper stickers. There are a couple of things that you can use. You know, I look for bikes that are coming at it not from the biker end, cyclist end, but for those of us who are driving the cars that hit the people that we hit in pedestrian walking or riding a bike. So I'm kind of interested in raising money, which is what I'm doing, to try and get people like Cape Cod 5 and other banks to produce posters that we could kind of get around, or the bumper stickers that we might be able to pass out at some of these community events, like Orleans has a Celebrate Our Waters in September. You've each got something going on in your towns. Because my sense is that you need to have the opposite focus as well. I mean, you're all talking about projects that are going to take years, basically, and the work has to be done, and it has to be done, there's no question. But meanwhile, people are getting run over, and we just find at the micro level that about a dozen of these J1 students out of the 4,000 are getting hurt each year. So the police stations are working with us, and they're distributing lights to the cyclists that they see riding down Route 28 and Route 6A that you all can't do anything about because they're state roads. And they won't wear helmets. That's the other thing that we've ascertained, and the police told us too, that, you know, until the state law changes, you're just not going to get a 20-year-old student to wear a helmet. And so we're going with ugly-looking neon vests and bike lights and things you wear around your head and bike packs, whatever you call them, backpacks. And I just throw that out to all of you because I think you have to come at it from here too, as well as from the other place. And I think incorporating, as one of those posters says, the people that are driving and the chambers of commerce and the, you know, all the people that you always think of, but not just the people that are riding the bike trail, the ones that are working, who are at least these 4,000, you know, who have no other means of transportation in the summer. So that's it.
So you need to figure out some way of making it cool to wear an orange band
Yeah,
around your
that's
head or
right.
a.
That's right, and
But-
that's hard. But, you
So
know,
where
just
does
to,
the money come from to support all
Um,
these
well,
different
actually, the
things?
Regional Transit Authority gave us $20,000 to jumpstart it and to buy lights the first year, and they've
Okay.
continued to do it each year. And with that, I go running around to various, and I even got an accident lawyer to give us $500 last year, looking for clients, I think. But,
Do the employers, like Waquasa
the
and
the
CPI,
employers do the trainings.
do they
And
provide any
what they are
budget?
doing is
No.
providing a late-night bus in the Lower Cape, anyway, those same organizations that I mentioned. There's another program that the sponsors and the employers are doing, which is to rent buses from Cape Destination, which is a private company. One of our issues, as I said to Lev earlier, is that the Regional Transit Authority gets their money from the feds. And they also are the ones that have all the Council on Aging buses, because for 12 years, I've been talking to Tom Kerr about why can't we use the Council on Aging buses at night? You know, they're just sitting there. And apparently, there's something in the legislation that says that they can't sublet, they can't rent. We thought we got there about 9 or 10 years ago, and then Tom found that it actually was impossible. So this year, my plan is to go to the legislators too, but essentially it's banks and like Snow's gave us a bunch of lights, and some of the bike shops have been great, you know, and they're trying to help. But my big resource is you guys, because last year they got us, and the police, some really great discounted lights that we're hoping will happen again this year.
Well, thanks for sharing that
You're
perspective.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So we
Thanks,
want-
Lev.
I'm gonna head out.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
We're
Lev.
gonna do
Safely.
some quick report outs of our task force groups.
Yep. Want to take the lead on it?
I could. Yeah, hey, David, are you there? Thanks, Lev. Drive safely.
I want to turn it in if you want.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to get your handout back.
Hey, there we
Hey, guys.
go.
There's a couple of
people.
good-looking guys.
Yeah. Down there in the sunny south.
Absolutely.
We're up here in the freezing north.
Yeah, rub it in.
Um,
There you go, yeah.
So, I'll speak really quickly about our mapping task force group. So Greg, David, and I met on November 20th. And basically, we all agreed that our goal for our work was this, I'll share it with you.
Copy this.
To identify and publish safe bike routes around and between our towns that will enable residents and visitors to experience our communities and connect them. So we discussed the current maps and their limitations. This was really nice tonight because now, you know, we identified the Cape Cod Commission as one of the partners that we really needed to connect with. Andy, you as well. We recognize that a lot of groundwork is done, and we just want to be able to pull together some of that work. We started a shared Google Doc for the three of us to develop a work plan that we thought we'd be able to work on remotely until David's back in town, and then we'll see if we can do some actual groundwork to put together. You know, I think tonight, the resources, David, that Lev shared tonight are exactly some of the things we were looking for.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'm really gonna be interested in seeing what the process they use for that gap analysis. And I think that, yeah, and that Route 28 study would provide us with some direction for the Harwich to Chatham, avoid Route 28 kind of route that we're thinking of. So there's a lot of good possibilities. It's gonna take a while, and we'd love to have a couple other members to support and help that if as we go forward, we can rustle up a couple. And we should introduce you, because you came late to the meeting. Are you Michael? I can't.
Sorry, Andrew Dockin from the Harwich Group, everybody.
Oh, Andrew, great.
Yeah,
Great
sorry
to
I was
see
late,
you.
everybody. I had a meeting in North Dartmouth as well as New Bedford.
Yeah, no
this
worries. I
afternoon.
wanted to get the attendance, and I wanted to be sure you
Yep.
were there.
I
So
apologize.
Andrew from Harwich.
5 o'clock can be a little untenable for me sometimes,
Yeah,
so
thanks a
apologize to
lot.
everybody.
Thank you. So, did you want to add anything, David?
No, just that the gap analysis that Eastham does sounds like a perfect template for us to follow in terms of finding out, the best roads. As he had mentioned, I'd like to see the website already done, but to kind of piggyback on what they've done seems like a great way of proceeding.
Yeah, I'm looking at our to-do list for our next steps. We had 7 items, and I think we've accomplished everything but one, which is to recruit a Harwich member. So I will speak to that right now, if we have a Harwich member who wants to join us. But we're kind of on hold, I think, for any actual legwork until, for another month or so. That's it.
Okay, and just to update folks on the user count, user profile, what we call the Path Usage Working Group. We met once. I passed out, I guess, what I will call a mission statement. One of our members, Joe Sullivan from Brewster, is really good at kind of helping people focus on the key things and kind of capturing the essence of them. He probably did most of the drafting of this document as well as guiding the conversation. The 5 tasks that we've laid out here, 3 of them are really dealing with data collection. How do we collect data? Where could we get data that's already been collected? Are there other sources that might be helpful in terms of just creating a database of users, and how do we start thinking about developing a user profile? Susan's suggestion is, I think, a good one. The other 2 tasks are kind of, once we have data, what do we do with it? How do we analyze it? How do we make it tell a story? I think the next step on this would be for this group to reconvene sometime in the next month or so to begin thinking about data collection, who we might approach for whatever data that may exist, be they the Cape Cod Rail Trail. I think we've got the data from the Cape Cod Commission. There may be others that we haven't identified. We'll begin thinking about how we might collect data and how we might get the resources to do that. So those would be the sort of the next steps for the Path Usage Working Group. And I acknowledge Steve Wardle, who's sitting next to me, Ken Stewart, who's enjoying the sun in Florida as well, Brad Bivens, who's also enjoying the sun in Florida, and Joe Sullivan, who's in Brewster, as well as myself, who've been working on this particular operation. And with that, why don't we switch over to thinking about our timing of our next meeting. We'd kind of talked about having these meetings on a more of a quarterly basis. It seems like the right rhythm. It's not cluttering up the calendar yet. If you go longer than that, one loses focus, I think, on what we're doing here. So I think we're thinking of the quarterly rhythm for these kinds of things. Anybody have any thoughts on that in terms of that? Is that too much, too little, about right?
I think it's about right.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Makes sense.
So I think let me kind of gather with the other chairs, and we'll look at some dates about 3 months out. We'll get an email out to try and schedule that and kind of work on what we might accomplish at the next meeting beyond just updating the group on what the working teams are looking into and what progress they're making. Any other thoughts or comments on this?
Keep an eye on the next week for an email from us at Mass Bike for, we're gonna do a preliminary call at the end of the month, just a conference call, to try and get all the Bikeways committees on the Cape, just kind of introduced to what we're looking at for the next year. And then ideally we'd like to get together sometime at the end of February as well. We're not excluding any particular groups. We're starting with the Bikeways committees. If you guys feel like somebody might be left out, feel free to share that conference number when we do get it out. But just keep an eye out. I have everyone's email address already. I've already put you on the list. We're just waiting for the content to be drafted, and so keep an eye out for that. I was meeting with the executive director last week, and I commented on how effective I think your collaboration down here has been. I say down here, I live in the Mid-Cape, so. I think that it's just it's an effective way for you guys to share successes and challenges. And I really would love to see the Lower Cape do it, and I'd love to see the Mid and Upper Cape do it too. So we may lean on you guys a little bit as a poster child in the future, but we're trying to reinvigorate the chapter down here this year, so we want to expose a little bit of that, but we're certainly here to help. And I want you guys to continue to lean on me whenever you can. And I can't promise anything, but I'm certainly willing to do what I can.
Well, we're always happy to lean on Mass Bike, for sure.
I think
As long as
that's
it's not for
awesome.
money.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Oh,
And
no.
it's gonna be through a conference call, or
Initially,
will there
yeah.
be a face-to-face location for?
In February, the date that we have mapped out is January 31st. We'll do a conference call probably in the evening, just because there's so many folks
Yeah,
that we'd like to get together. There are some towns that we don't have anyone identified from, like Truro. We have folks from pretty much everywhere else. I think Mashpee's one missing link too. But there's folks everywhere, and trying to get everyone together, I think, in one place just is not feasible.
That sounds like a great idea. I applaud.
Yeah, I
An
think it's
email,
an awesome-
an
Yep.
email to us.
Yep, we'll send an email out. That'll come probably from the deputy director in the next couple days here.
I think that is awesome, because, you know, we talked about this from the very beginning, which was part of the impetus for getting these 4 towns together as a starting point, is that everybody's working really hard, but a lot of it is not connected in a way that makes sense. You know, the Vision 88 is fabulous, going down the middle of the Cape to go from, you know, Bourne to Provincetown. But the bottom line is, that's gonna bring people down the middle of the Cape from Bourne to Provincetown. It's not gonna bring them into Chatham, or into Harwich, or into Orleans. And our towns are really relying on that. One of the things I was gonna mention to you, Susan, in regards to complete streets, the beauty of getting involved in complete streets, from what I can see right now, at least for us in Orleans, is that it's pushing the envelope on comprehensive planning and discussion. Because by their own admission, in our town, DPW, which is great, and they work really hard, and we've got a really committed director, you know, they're kind of going street to street, road to road, putting out the fires and doing what's necessary, oftentimes by request of community members who have leverage or think they do, that want a particular road paved, or a sidewalk here and no sidewalk there, as opposed to really looking at the infrastructure of the roadways from a comprehensive viewpoint, and from a comprehensive viewpoint that's not just designed for motorists, but is designed for motorists, for public transportation, for bicyclists, for pedestrians. So, you know, the transportation that you spoke of, Gail, if you look at any of our towns, it's very difficult to find a user-friendly bus stop, for example. And in Orleans, we often see people standing in front of, you know, Landho with suitcases in crappy weather, and that is not encouraging use of public transportation, right? And that's a small slice of what's missing from comprehensive planning for transportation infrastructure in a town.
Do the comprehensive plans, I know you're talking about the DPW, and that makes sense, but in my mind, I'm thinking of the master plans, our town's comprehensive plans. And I'm just wondering, there must be a section on it. I was once
There
involved
is.
in 30 years ago, but I don't,
Yeah, I'm sure in all the towns in Orleans, there's a transportation
Right,
section of our
section.
comprehensive plan. And interestingly enough, it speaks to the vision that's the Complete Streets
I would
vision.
think so.
But the implementation is the next, that's what's missing, is, you know, those plans. ask your own select board. I mean, even in our town, we have plans that have been done. I looked at about 8 different studies that have been done between 2006 and 2017 that were commissioned and done by the Cape Cod Commission.
Yeah.
Very few of them have had any legs.
But
You
the
know?
comprehensive plans are required through the commission, actually, to each year, when you go to town meeting, and is the case in each of the towns, you have to come in, if you've got one, with section 10.3.2, you know, of what you've done since last year. And they're, in that sense, they really are good documents because they are living documents.
They
And
are.
so I guess I just encourage you to get your town planners on board because I hear what you're saying about the DPW, but having had 40 years of town involvements, you know, now that most of the towns do have town planners, the planning and an elected or even appointed planning board, you know, they really should be your allies.
They are, yeah. We've, in Orleans, we've had good connection with our planning board. They're great. But anyway, I think that's awesome. So I'm totally on board with that. I'm sure the rest of you are too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So John, did you suggest you might throw out some dates for us for,
Why don't you and Susan and Fran and I kind of collaborate on that, and then we'll
That sounds great.
cycle an email around to see what conflicts that might arise with that.
that's great. And I would volunteer that we're due to meet again in Orleans, so maybe we could plan on that.
Okay,
We haven't been there since last March, so
great.
we're happy to host. Great.
You want to adjourn the meeting, Fran?
Sure, yeah.
Jamie, we're all done?